Good morning, welcome to Felixstowe TV, Gainsborough Studio. Quick note of this notice, hopefully you can capture it, drag it off, print it out, pass it around. But it's only valid until tomorrow at 7 o'clock when there is a meeting in Felixstowe Town Hall about community health, what it means to you, yours, your family, family members, what it means to our community hospital. Meeting Felixstowe Town Hall, 7 till 9. Okay, did you get that? Captured. Fine. Apologies for what appears to have been a breakdown in sound coming from us to you. It's now been addressed, and we have an opportunity to welcome young Eric and old Bella. Old Bella.
I love the way that you say young Eric.
Well, you are. You're ever young, Eric.
I mean, you know that I've got sons your age.
I know you have. But fundamentally, young is a state of mind, not a state of a decrepit body.
You can either be happy or miserable. It's up to you how you are.
It is really.
So that's the lesson we've got to learn. Keep happy, keep young.
Well, you know.
You're a good example.
You ain't going anywhere else, are you?
You're a good example of it.
If only it were true. I'm told often that I'm quite miserable because I bring up serious subjects occasionally.
And of course,
and that distress people.
You're up for election, so
no, we're not allowed to talk.
You're not allowed to talk. I'm going to tell them all to vote for him.
No, you're not allowed to say that. We'd both be shot, taken from here to a place of law, because that used to be entertainment, didn't it?
Of
sort of 17th, 18th. It was, a bit of that in it. Some fires and things. Yes, we won't go there, will we? What we will do, though, is apologise to our guest today, Eric, on the basis that on Good Friday, you turned up here at this wonderful studio.
Somebody bullied me to come in on.
And that's right. And then you conducted your own interview with yourself.
Absolutely.
Which I think actually is lovely.
The presenter didn't turn up.
But I think I really think that's wonderful that you actually came, because you did have a pre-recorded DVD, did you not, of your 80th birthday celebration?
I don't think that's been put on yet. I've had several people been contacted me.
Yes.
They said, well, you said that you were going to put on this Eric at 80.
Yes.
And it hasn't been put on
well,
yet.
Will we check with the production capacity of this? I mean, it's such a massive organisation that we'll obviously have to originate a memo.
Yes.
And then make sure that memo is delivered to the relevant head of production.
This Eric at 80 is quite important.
Because
on Good Friday, I talked about how we lost our first baby.
Yes, you did.
And of course, the problem was that there's a reason for everything. And this Eric at 80 shows what happened, as a result of our losing our first baby.
Right.
And there was 150 people there, and you could see the result. That wouldn't have taken place if I hadn't have lost our first child.
Yes.
So my wife and I, my wife's the one who's the queen of all of this, obviously.
Right, yeah.
But that's another story. But I hope we'll put Eric at 80 on, and the reason it's going on isn't to sort of pat me on the back.
No.
It's really just to show how when people suffer something, there's a reason for everything.
Okay.
And people don't realise that.
I'm not sure I share that view, but
there is
it's how you respond to life's whatever.
If you walk down the road, he's agreeing with me.
Oh, right. Okay.
If you walk down the road and you're knocked over and you lose a leg,
you're going to have a different life.
Yes, but the whole point is, you say, well, why should it happen to me? But the whole thing is, if you hadn't have happened, something far worse could have happened. Right. Or there might be a reason for it.
So are you fatalistic then?
Well, I think that our whole life...
I mean, do you think your life is predestined then?
We have a lot of control.
Yes.
But it's like electricity. If you plug in correctly, if you do the right thing, then good things happen. Like electricity, you get the light and the heat. If you plug in badly, in other words, you do wrong things, then you get sparks and shocks and all that. So we've got to control over this minute. This is the only minute that works.
Right.
You can't change the past. You don't know what's going to happen in the future. This 1 minute, is what counts and what we've got control over.
Okay, on that basis, when you return from Paris, having gone with a possible contractor to buy redundant French... No, I'm asking the question on this occasion. You gave your wife a big shock because apparently the guy you went with had acquired the services of two ladies and you very sensibly in Paris declined, but your wife was very upset that it happened at all. Is that right? So that was a shock.
Right, yes.
And this was on your return to London.
Yes.
So you've come back to London.
But where you've gone wrong is
right.
It wasn't to do with armaments and bits and
pieces. Oh, I thought
like
you were
that.
off to buy an old ship or something.
No. That was a different chapter.
Oh, right. Okay.
This was to do with press studs. In the war,
oh, yes.
and all the way through, they were metal press studs.
And this was plastic.
And I discovered this people in Paris who were making plastic nylon press studs. And I got in touch with this factory owner who was supplying Woolworths.
Correct.
There you are.
Yes, no, you've got it all there because you got the UK agency and hopefully worldwide within the British Commonwealth.
That's right. And that was this man who really, he went off the rails a bit. He had loads of money.
He just got excited by Paris.
He got excited by Paris. Yeah. I didn't cooperate. He took the two girls up by himself.
Well, we won't go into this. No. The video is available, but it's on the porn channel, and you'll have to go there. We don't do that sort of thing.
We don't do
FTV.
We do it.
FTV is a community channel.
But at that time, I was sort of like an entrepreneur. I was working with this Russian millionaire.
I find him fascinating.
And he had a big premises in Fitzroy Square.
Yes.
Huge thing. He's founded Kangol Berries.
Oh, yes.
And he'd made a lot of money in the war with the berries.
Right.
And of course, after the war, the berries became a fashion item. And the demand was absolutely horrendous or tremendous.
Vaguely sort of.
And well,
I was very young.
All women used to wear berries in those days.
Did they really?
Perhaps
we should get them back.
They do come back. They wear them inside out now. It's something very peculiar.
Fashion comes around, goes around.
Cut a long story short, I've been doing all these different items with this man, and then of course I converted this variety theatre I did that for him, found it and converted it. There was an awful lot I did with him, and of course, so he began to look upon me as a problem solver. I managed to get berries into Woolworths, for instance.
Yes, that would be useful. But I heard about
just let me carry on, my dear, because I'm following the trend.
It was just the entertainment.
He was using me as a problem solver.
Right.
He, of course, because of the huge demand for berries, his factories up in Cumbria couldn't meet the demand. And he had his nephew running the factories up there. And, of course, he didn't get on awfully well with his nephew sometimes. They'd have tremendous rows in French. And so the end of it was, he asked me if I would mind going up to Cumbria and try and sort out the factories.
What, from London to Cumbria?
Yes, go and live in Cumbria.
Quite a contrast.
Quite a contrast.
Yes.
But I was game for anything. And I said, well, yes, that's fine, as long as I've got somewhere to live. He said, well, look, he said, we've got a huge house up there. I've got the whole of the top floor as my own luxury flat. He said, you can go and live there.
Oh, right.
Which so valued my services, which I thought spoke very well. Yeah. So at that time, we had our first boy had been born in London during this period.
Right.
So we took him and my wife, and she was very pleased because she was in this top floor flat in my father's house.
Right.
And so, well, here I'm going up to
a top floor flat in Cumbria.
No, it was the top half of it. You know,
okay.
It was the first floor, and it was a luxury flat, absolutely beautiful.
Right.
And of course, we got in there, and of course, downstairs on the ground floor was the nephew who was running the factories.
Oh, I see.
So we shared the house. In other words, just as the Russian had Mr. Sprarigan, John Sprarigan, used to share it. So he wanted me to go up there with his nephew and share the house.
Right.
But I'll get on to the living part in a minute. Went up there and I found there was one big factory at Cleatormore, which made the Kangol berries.
Right.
And they had another factory which was very clever, about 2 miles away, which made a competition berry. So in other words, they not only made their own berries, but they had the competition berry as well.
So you controlled the market,
which was very clever.
Did you see that? This is monopoly. Actually.
Well, I think some of these things are interesting because people don't realise what goes on in the world in business.
No, they don't.
So at any rate, I went up there, and the production was 3,500 dozen berries a week, which is a lot of berries.
That's a fair bit of berries.
It's a lot
of felt.
And a lot of people in the thing. And of course, I'd never been in a factory before in my life. I knew nothing about factories. And there I went in amongst, how should I say, I wasn't received with
Ladies.
open
No,
arms, because obviously the nephew thought, well, here's this man
Under
coming
threat.
up from my
Oh.
uncle.
Yeah.
What is going on? He's obviously reporting back to my uncle. So I wasn't what
So what sort of age
the
were you
flavour of
then?
the month. Early 20s.
So what was he?
20.
What was
And
the nephew?
he was about 45. So,
Oh, he would have
so
been, yeah.
he wasn't happy. He
hops.
wasn't a happy bunny.
No, he would
So
have been.
I wasn't ostracised, but I wasn't, well.
Can be very cold in Cumbria.
So he said, well, what I want, I said, well, I'll do anything you want. I'm here to help you.
Right.
And he said, well, if you just go round the factory, it was a huge factory. You know,
Yeah.
I don't remember how many hundred people we employed. But he said, you just go and you make yourself useful, you do what you like and go in. So I thought, well, how am I going to increase production? I know nothing about factories, I know nothing about how berries are made, anything. So I started off, each had separate departments. They had a knitting department where rows and rows of these knitting machines where they knitted the berries.
Oh, I see. Oh, it wasn't just felt berries.
But this is the whole point.
Oh,
they're
right.
knitted,
Right.
and then they're put through a felting process where there's great big wooden buffers which go backwards and forwards and with
Create
soap
felt.
and makes them felted.
Yeah.
Then they're stretched on formers to get the different sizes.
Yes.
They're
Yeah.
dried.
Yeah.
Then they have to go through and have the edges sewn round.
Yeah.
Then they've got to be stamped with the thing. So all these different places had different departments and sort of literally 30 or 40 girls working on each process.
So bringing ready-made felt.
So,
Yes, go on.
but you couldn't shape the felt. You can't shape the felt
right.
into a round thing like that. So it's
Right.
a very clever process.
Yeah. Okay.
So I started off and I thought, well, how am I going to increase the production?
Mm.
So I went to the very first department
Yeah.
who were knitting them, and I said, well, look, if you had to increase and this is to the man who was running it, if you had to increase it, how could you increase it? Well, he said, I could increase it by so much, but they wouldn't be able to catch up with me further down the line. I said, oh, that's interesting. So I've got it also. So I then went to the next supervisor along the line, did the same thing. I said, the fellow before you says he can produce an extra, you wouldn't be able to cope. I could cope, of course I could cope. You know? And I did that all the way through the factory. Yeah. And of course, nobody had ever consulted these supervisors directly themselves.
Oh, right.
Everybody had done it from the top.
They're little silos.
Pardon?
They're all in little silos, all these people.
Yeah. But they hadn't been consulted.
Oh, right.
Nobody had consulted them what they could do.
Really?
This is what I discovered.
Yeah.
It's been the top, said all them, you know, they can do this. Our production last week was 100. We'll ask for 105 this week. Or,
right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I consulted them. And as a result, I put the whole package together. And to cut a long story short, we went from 3,500 dozen a week to 5,000 dozen a week.
That's a fair
in about 3 months.
Right.
And only done by consulting the individual supervisors.
The same number of staff.
Same number of staff,
just
same
more
everything,
efficient.
Just more efficient. And just an interesting point on that, I used to interview some of the new staff, you know, because as the man found I was useful, he'd find jobs for me to do and what's it. And I used to interview the staff, and I remember seeing the men and interviewing them, and the weekly wage was £3 a week. That's amazing when you look back and see that, and people sort of
completely living off that.
And wanting jobs at that £3 a week.
Yeah.
And life was completely different. The fishmonger, for instance, go down to the fishmonger, there'd be a queue, and you'd find that the trawlers had just come in at Whitehaven, and they delivered the fresh fish, and you'd have the fresh fish literally the same day that it had been caught.
Yes, I know.
But then I went along, and it just shows you how you must never ask people to do anything you're not prepared to do yourself.
Right.
Because then, once we've got the production up to 5,000 dozen, then the nephew sort of said, well, will you go and do something with the other factory, the competition factory?
Yeah, I find that very odd, the competition factory.
It's very good. Yeah. Why not? Why not?
Well, you can present two lots of quotations from two different. Which is actually, I mean, it is nearly illegal.
There's probably laws against it.
Oh, there are now.
But in those days, this was purely legitimate. But I went, and as you see, it was being run by a man who was a lovely man, but he wasn't all that competent.
Right.
And the place was in a mess. So I thought, well, the first thing I've got to do is to tidy it all out.
Yes.
So I gathered the labouring force, there was about half a dozen working men who just kept the factory tidy and did it all.
Right.
And I collected them together and I said, you're going to come with me now and we're going to go around the factory and sort out, because as you came in the main entrance, there was literally, they had great big sacks of waste wool and huge ones, and it was all over the place. And I said, look, we've got to stack these all together in the corner. They take up a quarter of the space they're occupying. They're much too heavy for us to move and live. Really? I said, nonsense. And I was young and energetic in those days. And I jumped on the top and I grabbed one of these and I nearly broke my back. I pulled it up by myself and put it up there. I said, look, if I can do it by myself, 4 of you can do that.
Yeah.
So of course that shamed them into doing it. Yeah. And before we could say Jack Robinson, that factory was as tidy and as neat as anything.
Oh, right.
And of course, on the same lines, I remember once we had a cleaning lady, and I said, well, the toilets are so filthy, you'll have to go and clean the toilets.
Yes.
And she was insulted that she was being asked to clean the toilets. That wasn't part of her remit.
So who was to do those?
So I said, look, and I took her down there, and I took a bucket, and I cleaned the toilet myself.
Yes.
And I said, I'm honouring you by asking you to clean the toilets.
Right.
And she took it. But if I wasn't prepared to put my hand down and clean the toilet myself, but there's a moral there somewhere, and I'm not quite sure.
Actually, I hate to say it, military training teaches you that you're obliged to do. Because if you're going to mess it, you're clean.
Now, coming back to our living accommodation, we were enjoying ourselves in this big luxury flat.
Yeah,
it was absolutely lovely. But of course, my wife wasn't happy with it, because downstairs there was the other man living, and she's a very private person, a wonderful soul, my wife.
Yes, but
been married for 64 years, so she must have something very special about her.
Well, she's obviously long-suffering.
Long-suffering, that's what it is. She's put up with me for 64 years. But anyway, to cut a long story short, I thought, well, what are we going to do about it? After the war, shortage of properties.
Can I just say it's remarkable that the lady should be foregoing luxury for privacy, which is rather lovely.
Yeah, yes, but she's a wonderful person. But now, you see, to destroy my train of thought.
No, you were getting there.
I was getting there.
Yeah.
So I thought, well, what do I do? There's no houses, no what. So I did an advert in the local paper. I said, house or cottage wanted, isolated position or condition, secondary to beautiful setting.
Oh, right.
So I thought, well, that might hit it.
Position. Yes, go.
We got one answer.
Right.
And we went to this farmer, and he said, oh, get on the cart. And we got on the back of this cart, sitting on a bale of straw, and we went through about 14 different gates all the way up.
Wow.
And in the end, we came to the top of this, well, it's a fell in Cumberland, but it's a mountain, you know, and there was this cottage, and he said, is that isolated enough for you? Right on the top of the mountain by itself. Yeah. And I said, it's just what we're looking for.
Right.
The sheep were in it. So it shows you what condition it was. Isolated it was, condition it was, but the rent was £3 a year.
Oh, well, that's annual. I mean, that's unreal.
But there was
I take it there was no water, no electricity, no gas.
No water, no services at all.
No.
So the first thing we did was to get hold of all the, well, first of all, I decorated it all the way through.
Oh, right.
And of course, we
moved the sheep out.
We moved the sheep out, and we had, of course, in those days, there weren't the paints and the things to do it yourself.
No.
And we got a cement paint, which I painted all the outside with. Inside we used whatever it was, whitewash or something, I don't know. Didn't take me long to do. It's fine. We had cow sheds alongside it, and wonderful position. And we did it all out. We got wonderful oil lamps. My wife was so good with these oil lamps because as long as you keep them clean, you've got the ones with the little mantles, and they're quite as bright as an electric light.
You've got to trim your wick.
And then we had a Tilly lamp, which you pump up, and that's we used to illuminate. If we had guests coming, we'd put a Tilly lamp outside the front of the house and flood look like the front of the house. But what's interesting is in those days they used to build houses in relation to the weather.
Oh yes,
Today they just stick up a house.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter which way it's facing, but in those days,
north, south, got to be.
It was done in a specific, for the weather on that spot.
Yeah.
And we could, in the rooms in the front of the house, it was as quiet as anything.
Oh, right.
And if you went through to one of the back rooms,
yes,
facing the wrong direction,
yeah,
it was like a horror film. The noise and the wind.
Right.
People don't realise it. We've changed completely.
The Bartlett was built that way, though, wasn't it? That captures the sun,
well,
and avoids the wind.
It's done for it. This is
yeah.
But anyway, so we did the whole thing out,
right.
And I always remember one of the workers came up to see me there, and he said, "It's all right for some people."
Huh?
And I thought, well, it's been there. Anybody could have
done it. Yeah, absolutely.
And it was beautiful. It was really lovely, and we thoroughly enjoyed living.
And you had
there.
the child then, the young child as well.
And we had our second boy born up there.
Yeah.
And I'll always remember it because we had a roaring fire.
Yeah.
And in fact, we used to have a big tin bath, and this is the only place where we used to, the bath water used to get hotter the longer you stayed in it, because we'd get it out once a week.
Yeah, as you did.
Fire,
yeah.
Fill it up with boiling water, and the heat of the fire would warm it up. So the longer you stayed in it, the hotter the water got.
That's a selective.
But we had the doctor and the midwife came up.
Oh, right.
And because it was so isolated, the midwife sort of bedded down with us. The doctor had to go.
Yeah.
And so I had a big meal with the midwife, my poor wife upstairs in the bedroom.
Oh, right.
Then we all went to sleep in the armchairs. And then in the middle of the night, I heard my wife calling out.
And that was it.
And the baby was born up there, little Christopher.
Oh, right.
And so
in the middle of absolutely nowhere.
In the middle of nowhere, which just shows you.
His birth certificate must make interesting reading.
I suppose it does. I hadn't thought of that.
Have a look. Have a look.
But it was fascinating. It was a wonderful way of life. And you see, basically, we had an old motorbike, which we used to have. The transport was at a premium as well.
Absolutely.
And I remember when we had the child, I bought a sidecar to go on the motorcycle.
Yes, a lot of people.
And I remember taking my sister-in-law to see her husband in hospital, and going down the road, and the sidecar came adrift from the motorbike, and it went off into the side of the road with this poor woman in it. Fortunately, she wasn't hurt.
No.
But when we got up to Cumbria, one of the supervisors up there had a car for sale, a little Ford 8. So we bought this little Ford 8, and I used to use that for running backwards and forwards.
Right.
But basically, before we did that, I used to walk, and I used to have to allow about 3/4 of an hour to walk from the top of the mountain right down, and it was a terribly difficult road. You could lose yourself so easily. In fact, coming back one day, I did lose myself, and I was wandering, and I had these pictures in my mind of all these people who'd been lost for days and died on the fells.
So there was no supermarket next to you then?
Oh, no.
No big supermarket.
Coming back to this, I always remember coming down, I thought, well, I stood and I said a prayer, and then having said a prayer, I suddenly saw there was a wall in front of me.
Right.
I felt across the wall, and I looked, and there was the house.
Oh, right.
It was most such a relief, you've no idea. On another occasion, I wandered down, I found a beautiful ravine.
Oh, yes.
And I went back to my wife, she was there with the baby in the cot. I said, leave baby for a minute, just come and look at this ravine. It's absolutely incredible. It's only just down the road here, the road, pathway, So she came with me. Then we found that we couldn't find our way back. We were lost. And we wandered on the fells for 2 hours with the baby in the house by herself. We would be.
You would be.
But it was only just round the corner
from the
house.
Doesn't matter, you'd be locked off.
But then I came across a little hut, and in it were 4 men.
Really?
Sitting in this little hut. I think it was a stone hut, little stone hut.
Yeah.
And of course they told us how to get back, and we got back. But it was an experience, unbelievable, living by yourself on the top of a mountain. Absolutely wonderful experience.
But it's a whole different sort of environment. you're very, very related into nature, aren't you? Everything that moves and the weather, you're key to it.
Well, that's
so you stayed there for, so one would assume your period of improving efficiency both in ordinary berries and the competition berries came to a close, did it? Or what happened?
Well, then unfortunately my father in London died.
Who taught music and
he's a professor of music, and he'd been in the Navy for 22 years, and very talented man, wonderful man, and my mother was, equally wonderful.
So he died in the 50s.
Died in the 50s,
right?
And I think he saw the child for the first time. He just saw our first child.
Oh, right.
So that was we were rather happy about it. But anyway, so we gave it up and we came back to London.
Oh, right.
Because I was how shall I say, valuable to
the business.
Jacques Berrigan kept me going. He fitted in with my movements in effect.
Oh, right.
Which was a good thing. So I went back to London and started back on the old entrepreneurial thing.
Selling and selling and selling.
And of course doing my magic as well.
You're still doing that?
Yes, in fact I think it was there. I had an agent, a very good agent, and he got me the part with in the first Robin Hood series.
Oh yes, we've done them.
Have we done this?
Yes, we did.
We have done it. Oh, well, that's good.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, so I was doing that, and I was involved with the Interval Club, which is this organisation for these people coming down. So it was a very happy period.
Yes.
Although my wife wasn't happy because she'd had her own house up.
Absolutely,
And she came back, and she was in the middle floor flat of the London house, which of course she wasn't happy with. And there again, it's what you've got to do for your wife if you're going to keep her happy, or your husband if you're going to keep him happy. They come first. So I threw up the whole lot, and once again I put an advert in, and because I'd had in the war, I had experience on a farm, doing all sorts of farm work.
Your evacuation into Sussex.
And because of that, I put the advert in, similar sort of advert to the one we'd used up in Cumbria.
To move to where?
Down in Sussex.
Oh, right.
And I thought it'd be nice to go down to Sussex, in the part of the world where
you
I
had
was
some knowledge
being evacuated to and what have you. So
that was sort of where East Grinstead way?
That's the part of the world. I have to check with my wife.
We'll do that the next time, because we are running beyond clock, but we did start late, so we can have the exception. Sorry to have kept you from your coffee, cakes, bacon butty, whatever you may be doing. As a result of something that Eric said within the course of the interview, on Wednesday of this week, we are hopefully having some representatives from the community that have been involved in trying to put together a bid for a community bid for the Spar. Who very kindly agreed to come in on Wednesday and have a chat with us. And seeing as Eric has been talking about putting together theatres and whatever, I've invited him to come along and be a sort of joint participant. On Wednesday at 10, join us and find out what the community thinks it could do for the Spar, for the community, for you. Thank you for viewing. We will see you tomorrow morning, this station, 10:30 sharp, with vision and sound working
it's 10:30
perfectly. Well, no, 10 I said.
No, you said
no, to finish it,
10:30.
Something like that. Now, Bella needn't be here. Say bye-bye, Bella. Say bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.